Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from, either right now, live, or if you're watching this recording. My name is Annabelle Dumlao. I am partner here at Axialent, and I'm very happy to welcome you. And we've heard great things from our first webinar on the topic of behavioral risk management. So we've decided to turn this into a series. So you're now in number 2 of this series. I am very delighted to welcome 2 guests today that I'll have the privilege of listening in and moderating their conversation. So please let me welcome Dr. Mireya Rachmakers. So if you can turn on your camera, Mireya, and briefly introduce you to the people joining today. Although I think if they're tuning in for a second time, they already know you. For those of them who don't, Mireya is one of our expert partners in the field of behavioral risk management, and she's quite renowned in that field, and among others in the area of behavioral risk, behavioral science, as well as social and organizational psychology, among others. So we're very thrilled to have her on board. And I'm also delighted to introduce Frank Dannenauer. Frank. So I am very happy to have Frank, who is an engagement manager here at Axialent. And he brings a lot of expertise and relevant experience in corporate restructuring. So let me kick this off, and I will give a few pointers on housekeeping rules of how we're going to have this conversation, but I really need to ask Frank. Let me kick this off by asking you, because I've known you and our community knows you, and the clients that you work with at Axialent know you for your expertise in leadership development at the service of culture transformation, right? However, you also carry expertise in restructuring. So I'm imagining that you can tap into that experience, right? To tell us, what are the biggest mistakes that you've seen in the past with regards to this very demanding and challenging topic, right?
Yeah,
If you
thanks.
can start off.
Yes. So, yeah, you're right. I did a lot of restructuring, all kinds of restructuring, from mergers and organizational changes to downsizing. And when I look back at one of the big projects, like I had to close down, basically telling everybody in my team, "You're fired." Okay. But our global operations continues. We need to serve countries across the globe. So please come every weekend and help transfer those services. So it's a mission impossible, so to speak. But with the help of, luckily, I have, apart from my leadership experience, in parallel, I studied organizational psychology, and I did a master thesis on downsizing. So then I had all the rich experience, and I interviewed many leaders across many companies regarding this situation. And I think I would just, to start us off, I would name 3 things. One is I experienced that leaders find very different situations if the measure, the restructuring measure, has understandable purpose and story. So if I'm fired or change role against my will, I can go home and explain why it happens. Or I go home and just say, look, those corporate managers, they want to maximize their bonus, and that's why I'm laid off. No? What is the greater purpose, the storyline? Where will we go? Where will this organization go? What's the reason? That is more important than we might think. So if any of you does a restructuring, talk to us early, because the first announcement already makes a big difference. Then, of course, leaders normally don't understand the hidden dynamics, what's happening underneath the surface in such a situation from a psychodynamic perspective. And then they make terrible mistakes, stupid, avoidable mistakes. Not stupid because they're stupid, they're very intelligent people, but because they don't fully grasp what's going on in their teams from a psychodynamic and organizational psychology perspective. And then they make very, very terrible mistakes, and then everything goes south. And we can avoid that if we help people prepare. And the last one, just to start off, is often we fail to prepare leaders for this, because for leaders, especially tough also, you know, because you have to receive the company order to execute this. You might be impacted yourself or not. And then some leaders burn out. So I interviewed a lot of leaders in those situations. And then first they start off saying, well, we do this professionally, you know, they want to show a strong picture. And then you go further and they say, well, I can't sleep anymore. I'm not sure if I want to be a manager moving forward. You know, then you hear all the pain coming through. And so it's tough for leaders more than they want to admit. And but if they go through it in a good way, it can be an enormous growth opportunity. So leaders, great leaders, are born in a crisis. So what makes the difference between a leader who is burning out in a crisis and who is born as a great leader? And we can help, or there's help for people to go either way, you know, to avoid going downwards and to really use it as an opportunity for growth.
Wow. Yes, I really resonate with those three main, let's say, roadblocks, right? Stumbling blocks, I would say, in restructuring exercises or downsizing that, you know, that you yourself have had the opportunity to witness. But, you know, from that, I would imagine that many people in our audience are thinking there are many risks associated to that, to the lack of preparedness of our leaders, to the lack of a greater purpose and story. Like, do you make that story up or what, you know, and other risks as well. So I imagine people get that there are risks. However, what I'm hearing you say, Frank, is that people don't fully understand them. And I think this is right up your alley, Mireia, right? I think from your expert point of view that you would be able to explain the importance of conducting behavioral risk assessment, specifically tailored, right, to restructuring exercises or situations, right? So what would those unseen risks be that people in our audience should be made aware of?
Yes, thanks, Annabelle. And if you allow me to I'd like to answer this question and using the metaphor that we use in our last webinar as well, the visual of an iceberg. And hopefully Benja will, yes, there's the magic. We talked about this iceberg in the last webinar. I'll just go through it very quickly because, you know, this is obvious and very helpful. You know, we all know an iceberg has a visible part and it has an invisible part. And usually the invisible part is quite large and the visible part is rather small. But if we compare that to organizations and apply that to organizations, organizations have a visible part and they have an invisible part, right? So the visible part of organizations is it's the policies that we have, the structures that we've put in place, the governance that we have written down, the targets that we have set. It's the behavior of people, right? It's how leaders communicate. Do they show up or not? So there's a lot that we can see, right? But there's also a lot that we cannot see, but which is there, right? And which is influencing what we do and what we say, right? So the invisible part of organizations, that's what's going on underneath the waterline, the hidden part, as Frank was saying. And that's about, you know, the beliefs that people have around the purpose of the organization, their own purpose, how to deal with conflict, for example, or how to deal with uncomfortable situations. You know, should we not talk about this, or should we talk about this in extreme? There's convictions that people have how to deal with those kind of situations, and there's also dynamics between people, interactions between people. Is there trust or not? You know, oh, you're saying this is restructuring, but you know what? You're only in this for yourself, right? You don't care about us. There's trust, there's emotion, there's sentiment. There is a lot going on underneath that waterline. And especially during a time of restructuring, right? We all know there's a lot of turmoil. You know, things are changing with respect to those structures and policies and, you know, the visible part, but a lot is going on also underneath the waterline, right? People have a lot of ideas and questions and interactions and emotions around restructuring, and especially in those times when there's so much going on, it's incredibly helpful if you know, at least if you have insight of what it is, what's happening out there. Where are people in that process? So in that sense, it's incredibly helpful to understand what's going on underneath the waterline, to understand if you are exposed to certain risks that are related to behavior. So think of an obvious one, I think we all know, is the risk of people disconnecting, right? People slowly moving away from the organization, not feeling loyalty anymore, not feeling connected to the people, to the purpose, withdrawing actually, right? Those are, and this connection can show itself and materialize in very different ways. But it's one of those risks that you can run as an organization that is not visible. It will not come back very easily in your management reporting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is invisible, like not visible to the naked eye. So I remember just having this conversation with a leader last week, very recent, right? We were talking about this metaphor of the iceberg and how it helps make sense of certain things that happen on the surface, but you need to dig deep, right? And the leader was saying, it must be difficult to go down there. And I equated it to, like, yes, you can snorkel at the top, or to dive down, you need special gear, right? Oh, look at this. There's a little emoji when I do that gesture. Wonders of technology, right? So the thing is, down there, it takes special skills, right? It takes special tools to be able to navigate underneath the waterline at a deeper level, and it takes talent in a way. So, and I hear you, Mirja, like the specific unseen risk of people checking out, and that affects our talent. So, Frank, to you, have you seen talent retention, or taking care of talent strategies, if we call it that way, that can help motivate and retain the talent that is so critical during these processes?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I love how you point out to this risk of disconnecting, because we often look at those people in restructuring who are affected, impacted, like laid off or moved to another part, those who leave in one way or another. But the problem is those who stay, and this will have a cost to it for years to come. And now, of course, you have this normal procedural HR instruments which are helpful. But then I think in such a phase, people lose trust in the company quite a bit. And the person who is best positioned to still motivate people is the direct superior. So what can you as a leader, if you're directly dealing with a person, because you're still a human face of this now perhaps dangerous organization, you're still this human face. So what you can do is you can start by finding your own authentic voice, how you can make sense of this. And this shouldn't be an easy thing, it should, if restructuring and downsizing comes easy to you as a leader, you're in the wrong place. It shouldn't be easy. You have to have the compassion. You will suffer from it too, but you shouldn't go to the place where you're checking out also. If you stay in the situation and you start making your own authentic story about it, your own authentic way. I give you an example. I was in this restructuring situation, which I mentioned earlier, where basically all my people were fired. And now I said, listen, we worked here for many years. We will go upright out of this building on the very last day, proud of what we did. Okay. And that was for them kind of like a storyline, okay, because they had to come every weekend, work, do overtime, despite having no perspective. So, and we did it, it was a message which resonated. Professional pride resonated with them. It's just a simple example, and it may be different in different types of situations. So, but you create an authentic story which people can connect to. And then there's a second last part I want to mention. If there is a dangerous situation like this change and people feel like the danger of it, oh, a merger is announced, what will happen to us, you know? Will we be integrated in this big company, or will, so whatever it is, it's like if a child is afraid, it's no different. We're no different that we are 54 and proud professionals. We have the same needs essentially below the surface. So if you as a leader can be this teddy bear who holds the space for them, you know, where you can be stable for them, where you can be also vulnerable for them, but not being neither disconnecting and saying, look, we do this professionally emotionless, nor being taken aback by fear and being impacted yourself. If you find this place like a mother or a father, when the child falls, you don't say, you don't panic, you don't say, oh my God, the child fell. You would add to the misery. Equally, if you say you don't care, you would add to the misery. What you do is you stay present with those people, you hold their emotions in the same way a father or a mother does. This is a huge emotional work. It's very draining, very demanding, but that's where it counts. That's where it counts. And then people see the leader. I remember walking back from my office, back and forth in this aisle of how many dozen people from my office to the toilet. I probably 30, 40 people I passed, and I knew all of them are fired. You know, they will watch me. Who am I now? How do I interact? Who am I? Not what is the talent policy, where can I sign only? And that there we can all make a huge difference, and it's a very rewarding work to lead like that.
Thank you for sharing that, Frank. It's different when you hear about, you know, the best practices or others' practices, but from testimonials and your own lived experience, I think this is very powerful. I'm sure many people in the audience are asking themselves questions or want to ask us questions. Please use the chat box. There's a functionality in this webinar system that you can ask the questions, and we will dedicate time at the end of the webinar for your questions. Okay, it's not just me firing away. So please go ahead and ask us. So I heard you say an important word there, relative to emotions, right? Because from our work, we see the power of really mastering your own emotions and other people's emotions rather than having the emotions be the masters of you, right? Or hijacking the situation. And I think that is a skill that has not really been kind of honed as much as other managerial or leadership skills from my point of view. But you use a word, a verb that I haven't heard a lot. You said hold the emotions, right? Or maybe contain the emotions, because I hear strategies of leaders wanting to suppress or avoid, right? Like, what do you mean? I'm not a daddy or a mommy to you, right? So it's like, I hear different verbs, and verbs are for me an indication of the behaviors. You're talking, Frank, about be you, right, as a leader, like be yourself. Now, Mireia, for you, I want to ask about those behaviors, right? About how behavioral risk management, it's talking about behaviors, can support the process of restructuring. Because what can you identify or foster as a behavior that you want to see people in these transitional moments?
Well, I think what's crucial, of course, that, you know, restructuring is always about transitioning, right? You are somewhere and you want to go somewhere else. And I think in a lot of restructuring processes or a lot of change processes, we focus predominantly on the new situation, where we want to go, right? How we want to be, how we want to behave. And but, you know, we're always, you know, the starting point is here, where we are now. And I think understanding where you are now, what you're doing, how you're behaving, and why you're doing that gives you the insights that will help you move through that transition, right? So understanding the everyday reality for people, where they are now, what they're doing now, what their habits are now, and why they're doing things in a certain manner, will give you the concrete and the specifics that will help you move them towards the new situation. Mm-hmm. So talking about those emotions that Frank was referring to, yes, it is important to understand what's going on underneath that waterline. Are people, what are their emotions, right? Are they, and how are they dealing with them? Are they in avoidance? Are they over, shouting and ignoring them and moving into action? Or are they disconnected? We don't know. But we have to understand where people are now, digging in underneath the waterline, because then we know what they need in order to help them move towards where we want them to move. Either that's, people have to leave the organization and we need to be able to help them in the best manner, help them transition. But the same applies for the people who stay and who have to deal with, a new organization, who have to deal with the fact that people are leaving, that things are changing. So I think it's incredibly important to understand where you are now. And that's how behavioral risk assessment, of course, can help.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that, Mireille. And, pointing out, and I think Frank also pointed that out previously, right? It's like our focus seems to go straight to the people leaving or affected directly by the change in a restructuring, not only in downsizing. Tough decisions need to be made, right? But for both collectives, right? Both those who leave and those who stay. And sometimes by focusing just on one of them, you're missing a very important part of your role as a leader. Frank, what strategies have you seen work to offer support, right, to both those leaving or affected directly and those staying? Because I'm sure many leaders in the audience would like to know what could work for them.
Yeah, sure. So I would say one. I would just offer two kind of angles to it. One is really how you can consciously take, first of all, good care of yourself. And that might be surprising. You were asking, how do you take care of the people? I think say you are the first person to take care of. It's like in an airplane crash. You first put the mask on yourself. The organizations go downhill in such restructuring situations because their leaders can't deal with it anymore. Not, so again, who you are, how, and their strategies, how you can take care of yourself better. So let's start with that. But now, looking at your team, there are some very simple things you can do. For example, everything needs to become much more simple than in the past in terms of how you talk. Everything needs to have a clear rhythm, clear structure, simple structure. That would help people a lot. I'll give you an example. An announcement is made, we restructure, we change the organization, we're merging, whatever. Now starts the whole phase of uncertainty. Now everybody's busy and you're not doing your weekly meeting anymore because you're missing out on the first, on the second, and people are getting increasingly worried because the structures are falling apart. You should do the opposite and put very clear structures like, okay, listen, I can't tell you what it means today, but we will have a meeting on Monday, and then we will have a meeting in 4 weeks. And so it's a very clear, simple plan with very clear, simple messages. And also for those staying or leaving, if you have a good plan, if you say, listen, that's what will happen, this is where we want to go long term, after this restructuring is over, that's the projects for the future, that's the vision we have for those who stay, that's how you will contribute. Are you in? And you say that at the first day of the announcement. You sit in the first week, because the first day is a bit of shock to many people. Huh? In the first week, you already have a plan for everybody. And then there is a clarity and simplicity to it, and people have a chance to start making sense of it. So there are simple things like that where you can just if you understand what's happening below the surface, you know what helps people. And when people are uncertain, you put rhythm, simplicity, and structure into their lives as good as you can, and you're clear about it where you can't. And so that creates a situation where people start regaining trust, and they move with you, either when they move to another part or outside, or into a hopefully still attractive future.
I love that you pointed out our rhythm, because how many times we think of day one communications and then day two, day three, right? So the day one communications has always been part of my communications checklist, right? And after that, what? Radio silence. It's so counterintuitive and counterproductive that you said that a key part of the plan is the rhythm. Any comments on that, Mireia, from your perspective about the role of communication in restructuring efforts?
Yeah, no, I think about the restructures that I've been part of, and I've been on the receiving end, and I've been, in a management role where you also had to, of course, manage your team and work with your team, and I fully communication is about sense making, right? People want to make sense of what's going on, and so I remember that rhythm is absolutely important, but it's this mixture of, and I like the fact Frank was referring to raising children, right? Where this mixture of being clear on, what's expected, what are we going to do, but on the other side also love them and cherish them and give them attention. So there's this this mixture of clarity and warmth. So building that rhythm every week is important, but also I would say, if there isn't clarity, because I've been in radio organizations where it's unclear. Oh yeah, we have a message in 3 weeks, and then there's nothing, right? So being clear around that, but also what it does to you as a leader, and ask people what it does to them, and then you're making sense with each other, right? So, and I think that sense making, it's not just about sending messages, but that process of sense making, trying to get a grip of what's going on, but also expressing how you feel is incredibly helpful to to stay with the emotion without losing yourself or getting disconnected.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I can hear many examples in my head of people who have been going through this as leaders, like, what do I say? What do I say? I have to say something. What do I say in these moments, right? So, Frank, any thoughts about what to say, or is it not preparing what to say? What's the key here?
Well, I think you have to have your own authentic story of what you want to say. But also what Mireia just said is, it's not about sending messages, it's about listening first, because until people, especially those staying in your organization, until they haven't been heard, they will not move on with enthusiasm and motivation. So you need to give opportunities that they can talk about what they have lost. And you might now say, well, this is a little bit kindergarten. Well, if you want to pay it negative, it's kindergarten, but there is no other way. We're human beings. When people have their professional existence, their role and identity touched, it's a deep process, and we can't avoid it. So we can live with people who are stuck in a place of mistrust and loss, because they lost colleagues they like, they lost autonomy, whatever they lost, Or we can do the work, listen to people, help them move forward, and then restart a new motivated part of the journey once this digestion period is over. And it's not automatic, people have this change curve, and I love it in a way, but I hate it also because it's put in companies like, oh, we have to go through that. There is no automatism. It's not automatic that we go through it. We go through it if we do the work. We go through it with our teams. If we take the time to listen, so then people feel heard, then they slowly regain trust, and then they get out of it again. Some people get stuck because their leaders have not done the work with them. Yes.
Right. And that's the type of work that's the work, right? That is expected of leaders. And like I feel this deep sense of compassion. Like you don't go to management school to do this, right? And we are human first and foremost, even if we pretend or try to bring out the strength in us to face these challenges. It's like it takes skill. You don't do that every day, so you haven't developed the habit of having these crucial conversations. So it's a special skill set that needs to be replenished in a way, like revisited every now and then, because hopefully you're not going to be facing serial restructuring or downsizing exercises, unless of course you decide to dedicate your career to that. So I'd love for us to take a twist to the upside. Right? I'd like to bring us there. So Mireia, I'd love for us to look at the future for a while there, as companies emerge from this, right? Emerge from a restructuring or a downsizing. And many times it's like, okay, the show must go on. And we did all these things. We did our best to navigate through this transition. How can we measure impact? This was a common theme of questions that we got. I remind everybody you can ask questions in the question tab. We'll have some time at the end of today to address your questions. But how do we measure the impact of the measures that we did take as we went through this transition? So how it impacts business performance or our own culture, right? As we go through these steps. So especially because we want to know what lessons can we offer our audience about this. So I wonder what your thoughts are, Mireia.
Well, on a micro level, right, as a manager, I would say the key word is listening, what Frank just said, right? Check in every day, I would say, make sure you know where people are. But if you on a little bit more higher intermediate level on an organization, you want to track where you are with your division or a department or a larger part of the organization. I always say, if you want to understand and get measure the iceberg, so to speak, you need numbers and stories to understand what's going on. And the thing is, the metrics, the numbers are usually quite well in place with a lot of organizations, right? We have, across different functions and different roles in organizations, they have their metrics in place to keep track of what's going on. So for instance, HR will have their satisfaction indicators, their retention indicators, and information numbers like that. But you also want to tap into the stories, right? What is the sense-making people doing? What are they telling each other and themselves around what's going on, where they are? Well, luckily, developments are moving quickly with algorithms and machine learning, but also just some very handy platforms, right? That we've just recently are using with organizations as well to have large groups together in a dialogue and ask them questions, facilitate a dialogue, and there's platforms out there that can help you keep track of what it is that people say, that can analyze very, very fast and quickly. But I think at the core is that you listen to the stories that people say, the sense making they're doing. So underneath that waterline, what is it, right, that people tell each other? Because we know that, sometimes people say, oh, but that's perceptions. Yeah, but, perceptions is reality for people. So I would make sure to tap into those as well, if we talk about measuring and keep track of impact of what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Stories, as ancient as time, right? And algorithms and machine learning. I mean, it's like the cutting edge of technology also at the service of this. So it's exciting times for behavioral risk management, where you got that beautiful combination, right? So yeah, we titled this webinar, like the second that you're in, right? Risks and opportunities. So I want to shed light on that. So where are the opportunities in these types of exercises?
Well, the opportunity lies in that, there's this world to uncover, right? What's going on underneath that waterline. And the thing is, it can be messy and it can be complicated, and so we have this natural tendency to stay away from it. But the thing is, it's there and it's impacting your people and your organization. So it's an incredible opportunity to find out, to get information on what's really going on, which gives you a huge opportunity to actually have impact and drive change and help people transition. So, and I think you can, it's it's a process of maturing, right? Of developing yourself in staying connected to that. I sometimes call it the darker side of our organizations. But the thing is, if you connect to that, you're able to do something with it. You're able to learn from it. You're able to maybe lower the impact of it, the negative impact of it, and try to make use of it. So it's an incredible opportunity to mature as a leader, but also as an organization. But yes, it requires work. It requires emotional work. That's not always a walk in the park, but it's incredibly, it is an incredible opportunity.
Thank you for that, Medea. And I guess there are numerous examples, right, of how organizations going through what could have been the darkest moments, right, in the history, or at least their recalled history in that company, how they were able, and it's not about artificially looking for the silver lining. It's about truly getting the leverage of diving that deep into the situation. So Frank, just to round this out and give way to the audience for their questions. I'm sure that they have a lot of curiosity. Is this wishful thinking, or can you actually find an example that you can share with our audience of a company that successfully managed behavioral risk during restructuring or downsizing or something similar to that?
Absolutely, and the good news is it is possible to manage it well. Yes, it is possible.
Oh, thank goodness, Frank.
So I once had a project. I was not a leader in the organization anymore. I was working as a consultant, and a team had been discontinued. They had received their letters of departure, and then the senior management discovered that their strategic project they wanted to be finished, but they were the only ones who could finish it. now you might wonder, well, why would companies do that? Well, very often those things are not thought through. You make big announcements for the stock market or whatever, and then you find out, oh. And so we went in, we finished the strategic project in time, in budget, with the same team. Not everybody was on board, like not everybody, but I think 80% were on board. And so it was a wonderful experience, both for the people who were re-enlisted, re-engaged, had fun for another half year, and then departed proud of what they achieved, and then it's like you see, you can achieve incredible business results. It's not a guarantee, it's not like a machine where you have a formula, but if you are able to understand what's happening under the surface, it is much easier to navigate this, And then also you see people grow. Also those people, you see them grow. You see them losing their false idea of being just an employee, with the security of the company, and they're a little bit laid back. And now they see much clearer for themselves what they want from life. They grow as leaders. They become leaders on their own right. You see people step up and really develop if they are supported through a crisis. So I think, yes, it can work, but it's better to a little bit understand what's going on. And in that case, then restructuring is not the beginning of the end, but it's a new beginning then for the organization and for the people. Yeah.
I would like to keep that in a little jar, right? So could be the beginning of the end or a new beginning.
Yes.
I really think that's the light of hope of being able to do the work, not your typical work, your 9-to-5 job, but to do the more challenging and demanding type of work that this requires. So I'm very grateful that we're able to have a conversation about that is not so evident, that is not taught in business schools necessarily. It's not part of the balance sheet, but it does add a lot of value to those leading organizations in this day and age. So I'd love to open up for questions from the general audience. I wonder if we have something here. Let me check. All right, so here's a question, and hopefully the others can just chime in and ask your own questions. And I wonder which of you would like to answer. If the company suddenly starts talking about things that they have never talked about before, and it happens right in the middle of the restructuring process, I think this could be perceived as cynical. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked about the change curve, and I have an ambivalence about it. So there's a time for everything. It's not automatic, but of course now starting to wave the flag of values and purpose and so forth in a phase where it's not appropriate. Is of course counterbalancing. That's typically one of the things I meant when I said people do terrible mistakes. Terrible mistakes where you say the right thing but at the wrong time, and then it's backfiring and you don't even understand what's happening. So your timing is important, and also that you talk into the listening of people and not send those messages, like a marketing thing, but you talk into the listening of people, you test it with people. And one more thing is, it's not a process where you can plan exactly how the reaction will be, but you test it. So you talk to people. This would be what we want to announce. How does this come down? And then you learn from the reactions, and you come to a place where you can really send the messages so that people can listen at the right time. Yeah.
What do you think, Miriam, about this perceived cynicism, or what's your take on that?
Well, I think this is again about sense making, right? And I understand that if you're moving towards a different situation, you also are going to use different kind of language or words or things, right? Because you want to do things differently. But people need to be able to make sense of that, right? So I was thinking about this example of wanting to improve collaboration, wanting to be more efficient, saying that people have to trust each other, right? And you launch the word of trust into this communication in because you want to drive this efficiency and effectiveness in collaboration. Well, the thing is, then it's also important to be honest. Why are we talking about trust all of a sudden, right? And what's keeping us from not trusting each other? And then we're starting to dive underneath that waterline. So you can introduce, of course, something new, but make sure people are able to make sense of it and connect it to where they are now. And then, you know, dig in and dive in. Don't be afraid, but yeah, make sure you're not doing this in a superficial way, because then, yes, the risk is that people become cynical and disconnected.
Absolutely. Maybe it's as simple or as complicated, I really don't know, as acknowledging that we haven't talked about this, and it's, you wish we had talked about this sooner. Well, the good thing is for everybody in the webinar, if you foresee that you will find yourself in a leadership position and having to have these crucial conversations, well, you can start already, walking the talk, so that like we live in a VUCA world. It's very rare that you will not face this type of challenging situation. Hopefully not, but you never know, and you can never be prepared enough. Another question from the audience: which are the symbols that a company can send to people in the middle of a crisis? Not only from their direct managers, but I guess this person is asking about in general, okay? Can you give examples of which things to avoid? What type of messages, unintended messages, right? Like, be careful with this symbol.
Yes. I give an example, perhaps of an extreme case, but perhaps that brings home the story. So unintended messages come from a fact that behavior which would be normal in normal times is not normal in crisis situations. So I give an example. We have the announcement day of a major restructuring, and then you put security people in front of the gates. Because you're worried that you want to have the senior managers flying in from all over. They want to have them safe, which is normal. Normally, it's not a bad thing, but you need to understand on which ground it falls. So I come as an employee, I see new security people I've never seen, and then I learn that we will downsize. This is a catastrophe. So now they think we are dangerous. Now I build up this out of an innocent and even well-meaning desire to stick to security protocols, which perhaps the corporation has, which in normal time nobody would have even noticed, but now it's noticed, and now it's a sign of mistrust, and it's the start of a catastrophic emotional meltdown for the employees.
Mm-hmm. What a powerful symbol, right? And it's helpful to think in those terms about the culture, right? That the messages that people are receiving are not just from your communications, not just from how you're showing up in your behaviors. There are also symbols like that one. So
exactly.
being very
but
mindful.
you wouldn't know easily what to avoid if you're not used to think below the waterline. It's difficult to know what should we not do. So have one or two people who are trained in organizational psychology and are experienced those processes to filter out, to avoid the biggest mistakes, basically. Yes.
That's great advice, Frank. Thank you. All right. Okay, any other questions? It doesn't seem like it. So if any last remarks, Frank, Mireia, I think this has been a very helpful conversation, because for me, the main message here is that it's possible to take this, turn these very often traumatic and dramatic situations to really make them opportunities. Because we're all part of something bigger than just this circumstance or just this exercise. If you're in the middle of restructuring, in the middle of downsizing, but if you're going to continue to be in the business world, that you better come out of this better equipped. So from what I take from our conversation is that you've seen this happen. You've seen people who put in the work actually see the unseen risks, those that are not obvious to the naked eye, but also turn them around so that you actually can face a new beginning. So for me, that is my main takeaway. But if you'd like to wrap up kind of this conversation, Mireia, I'd love to hear from you. And then from you, Frank.
I think it's, you know, in addition to what you said, it takes work, it takes effort, right? It takes dedication and skills and maturity, but it's absolutely doable. I think it's also an interesting and energizing journey if you go that route. And as we are all human, right? I think we are all able to do this. And yeah.
Thank you, Mireia. Frank?
I'm just reminded about a vacation I had in Indonesia a long time ago. And I was under the impression that I could drive myself, and it turned out I couldn't. So I couldn't because the traffic was such, and the signs were all in, I mean, it was in a different language. So I ended up after 2 days to hire a driver. And you know, there are situations, if you're unfamiliar with the surrounding, just get a driver, you know, and then so that would be a message. And then don't think it's extremely complicated, but you will need, at critical moments in these processes, you will need a good friend who understands, or a good consultant, or a good colleague who went through this several times, so who encourages you, who gives you some words of wisdom, and who helps you through that. And then it can be a rewarding and totally helpful, deepening and growth inducing process. So
I love that. I love that. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Mireia. Thank you so much, Frank. Thank you to our audience. And for those of you who are listening to this recording, we will also, as we close this webinar, be reminded that we will share the recording with you. And for all those who registered, this was a big hit of registration. So thank you very much for the curiosity to come into this. We will also be sharing highlights of this webinar. And this is the second, I think, of a long series of webinars, because we have touched upon many significant topics that can help leaders and managers and, you know, individual contributors even in our organizations in this day and age. So that, and also we're going to ask some very simple 2 questions at the end of this webinar, a poll to understand what else can we do to help you. All right. So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your days, whatever and wherever that may be. All right. Until the next time, we sign off. Bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.